I am Megan Mitchell, 32 years old, and I'm about to face my family after walking away 8 years ago without a single word. They think that by throwing my mother's birthday party at Kaia Lani Resort, a five-star beachfront getaway in Hawaii, I wouldn't dare show up. They look down on someone like me, a tour guide, and they assumed I'd decline the invitation, even if they offered to cover the flight. But what they don't know is this: 8 years is long enough for a real estate agent to serve 2 terms as president. My stomach knots as I pause, just one step away. The picture of the past comes rushing back, so vivid, it feels like only yesterday. Before you walk this path with me, let me know where in the world you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories like this. I was born in Miami, into a family whose reputation preceded even our name. The Mitchells were known throughout Florida for our portfolio of luxury real estate projects, from riverfront towers in Brickell to lavish suburban villas in the affluent northern districts. My father, Richard Mitchell, ran the company like a commander, disciplined, precise, and never letting emotion interfere with a decision. My mother, Eleanor, shaped the family's public image, always appearing at the right moment, impeccably dressed, and capable of making anyone feel a notch below her. My sister, Rebecca, was destined to inherit it all. Ambitious, sharp, never once denied a thing in her life. My brother Mason was the financial prodigy, Ivy League educated, speaking as if he had just stepped out of a Wall Street boardroom. And me, I was the one who was good at languages, loved exploring, as my mother would describe me in front of guests, half praise, half apology for how I didn't quite fit their mold. Even so, I never lacked anything in my childhood. I had everything a kid could dream of: a bedroom the size of an apartment, birthday parties on yachts, and summers spent learning horseback riding in Europe. And I used to think, if I behaved, stayed polite, studied well, then maybe the love in this family would be enough for me to carve out a place of my own. I used to believe that. Until the day I said what I truly wanted. When I told my mother I wanted to study tourism and anthropology, she looked up from her architecture magazine, stared at me for a few seconds as if I'd just announced I wanted to become a magician. You can study anything you like, as long as it's not one of those careers that can't even get you a retirement plan. I didn't give up right away. I laid out an entire plan, a double major in tourism management and local culture studies. I wanted to become an international guide, the kind who didn't just lead travelers, but opened a living world of language, history, and forgotten stories for them. My father said nothing. He simply poured another glass of wine and remarked coolly, "Mitchells own skyscrapers. We don't lead tours for backpackers." To him, it was just guidance. To me, it was a door slammed shut. After that, I was forced into studying real estate, because at least you'll have a guaranteed job in the family business. I complied, at least on the surface. But inside, I began living 2 lives, one for their expectations and one where I quietly nurtured what I truly loved. I enrolled in international culture classes at night, led student groups on fieldwork abroad during holiday breaks, taught myself Thai, Swahili, and Vietnamese. Each time I came home, I pretended I'd just returned from an urban planning seminar. Until the day they found out, and everything completely broke. They found out when a friend of my father's, who happened to be a sponsor of the International Studies program, mentioned me during a conference. "Your daughter is impressive. She gave a tourism seminar in Vietnamese, French, and English, kept me in my seat until the very end." My father said nothing. My mother got up and walked straight into the kitchen. They didn't need to get angry, because they had already decided to punish me in what they considered the most courteous way. That night, we didn't have dinner as usual. Instead, there was a meeting, just as my mother called it whenever she wanted to set a serious tone. I sat across from my father, Rebecca beside my mother. Mason was silent, eyes lowered. My father looked me straight in the eyes and asked, low and slow, Are you still studying those things about tour guiding? I answered without flinching. Yes, it's the major I love. He slammed his hand down on the table. The sound cut through the air like someone had just shattered a sacred rule. He stood up and walked away, saying nothing more. My mother smoothed the tablecloth, then looked at me, not angry, not yelling, but with an unmistakable finality in her gaze. In that case, starting today, all support will be cut off, and you are no longer part of the Mitchell family. That sentence echoed in my mind all night. I couldn't sleep. Early the next morning, before anyone woke, I packed a few clothes into an old backpack. On my mother's writing desk, I left a note. Thank you, but I need to live a life I believe is right. I left home with one backpack, $1,400 in savings, and an unpaid internship at an ecotourism company in Cusco. I slept in bunk beds, worked from dawn till late at night. Some days I didn't have enough to eat. Some nights I ran a high fever in the Amazon jungle from mosquito bites. But I learned to communicate with my eyes, in local dialects, with humility. I came to understand that crafting a journey wasn't just about booking hotels, but about helping people touch the soul of a culture. I went from Peru to Kenya, then to Thailand and Indonesia, coordinated tours, interpreted in conference booths, worked behind the scenes on community-based travel programs. I lived in rooms barely larger than a suitcase, ate with locals, and taught myself 4 more languages. In Hanoi, I met Mr. Vuong, a top tourism investor in Asia. He said just one sentence after a conference, "I don't invest in resumes, I invest in instinct, and you've got it." We built Solstice Travel Group together. I was CEO. He provided capital. I worked 18-hour days, often falling asleep with my head on the desk. We started our office and first clients in Bali. 6 months later, we expanded to Tokyo, then Barcelona. Our clients were high-end, but the experiences always began with the cultural roots. Through all this, I kept my distance from them. Now and then, there were stiff phone calls with my mother, a few holiday cards mailed on time, but nothing truly deep. They knew I was doing something with tourism, maybe cooking, maybe leading tours, maybe teaching cooking, but they knew nothing specific, certainly not about the scale or success of what I'd built. Solstice Travel Group grew faster than I had ever imagined. We had branches across continents, partnered with major resort chains, and were sought out by the elite, from Dubai to Geneva. 8 years after leaving home, I bought out all remaining shares from our investors, becoming the sole owner. I couldn't help but laugh when I realized, in the end, I did use the business education my parents insisted I get. Just not the way they ever intended. Last month, Solstice was featured in the prestigious travel magazine Wander Plus Luxe under the issue 25 Journeys That Will Change How You See the World. And our itinerary in Marrakesh topped the list. I didn't send a copy home. I deliberately let them keep seeing me the way they always had, as a girl still wandering around with a few old passports. Because I wanted my achievements to be recognized on my terms, not as some tool to win back their approval. The invitation arrived one April morning, printed on pearl sheen paper, lined in fine gold trim, lightly scented as if someone had misted each envelope before sending. I was in Bali when I received it, sitting by the second-floor window of a villa overlooking the Ubud Valley. Coffee still warm, laptop open on a half-finished market report. The sender, Eleanor Mitchell. No mom, no handwriting, just a formal printed line. The Mitchell family cordially invites Megan Mitchell to the 60th birthday celebration of Mrs. Eleanor at Kaia Lani Resort, a beachfront resort in Kauai, Hawaii, on the first weekend of June. Your presence would mean a great deal to us. I read and reread that last line. Your presence would mean a great deal to us. In 8 years, no one in that house had told me I meant anything. Even when my mother called during the holidays, it was just to briefly ask where I was, never how I was. Once a year, I'd get a text from Rebecca. "Merry Christmas. Mom mentioned you." That was it. I flipped the card over. They had rented out the entire oceanfront villa in Kauai's most luxurious resort. Ironically, the same one Solstice had just signed a strategic partnership with 3 months prior. Every detail, from the food, wine, space design, to the guest experience, had been crafted by my team, and they had no idea. No one in my family knew that the party they were so excited to host was fully in the hands of the very person they had once disowned. I held the card for a long time, not out of sentiment, but because I realized something. This wasn't a mother's invitation. It was a summons from an old world, a world that had once cast me out. And for the first time, I had the power to walk in not to seek acceptance, but to show I never needed it to become who I am. I opened my laptop, sent an email to the resort manager, confirming my attendance, but not as a partner. Just as a guest, invited but no longer obedient. I arrived in Hawaii on a gentle afternoon, the sunlight soft and hesitant, as if nature itself were treading lightly around things left unsaid. The shuttle stopped at the gates of Kaia Lani Resort, a high-end resort tucked into the mountainside, facing the deep ocean where the waves rolled ashore like quiet breaths in the wind. I stepped out in a simple black silk dress, hair in a low bun, no heavy makeup, just enough to look neat and not out of place among women with personal stylists in tow. The receptionist bowed, whispered to the manager, and he quickly approached with a smile and said quietly, "Welcome, Ms. Mitchell. Everything has been arranged as instructed by Solstice. We'll ensure no one knows you're a partner." I nodded. No glancing around, no returning the smile. Just walked toward Villa number 3, booked under my name, Megan Mitchell, without any additional note like the other VIP guests. That evening, I appeared at the beachside dinner, where candlelight flickered on the water, and golden string lights draped along the palms created a scene almost too beautiful to bear. But to me, it was just makeup on a gathering built on judgment. I walked in just as the dinner was about to begin. Rebecca spotted me first, and she moved quickly toward me, offering a hug that was more gesture than embrace, the kind used to maintain distance while making someone feel welcomed. "You look very simple. Still working in travel?" I nodded, calm as if it were the most routine of questions. "Still in the travel industry." Rebecca chuckled, soft but distinct, then turned to someone beside her as if sharing an amusing anecdote. "She still leads backpacking tours for students, remember?" My mother overheard. She said nothing, just let her eyes flick down to my shoes, low-heeled, soft leather sandals, the kind I wear when I might need to walk across 3 cities in a single workday. To her, that was a signal of lack of ambition, of someone who doesn't strive. The dinner began. Champagne filled crystal glasses so thin I feared they might shatter at a mere touch. The starter was raw oysters from the southern islands, the very kind I once introduced on our luxury sea route in Seychelles, though no one here knew that. I listened to stories of stocks, real estate, market predictions. The same tired narratives, still told with the enthusiasm of first-time revelations. As I lifted my wine glass, my mother leaned in slightly and asked, "How did you manage to afford this place? It's not exactly cheap." That wasn't concern. It was a cut. Small, but sharp. And instead of reacting, I just smiled and leaned back a bit to watch the light playing across the sea. The very light I had spent months calibrating, aligning the dinner schedule with the tide's retreat, to ensure just enough sparkle without glare. I didn't need them to know that. Not yet. I only wanted to see if they could look at me without the lens of the past, of expectations, or of disappointment. But clearly, they couldn't. Mason was the only one who said nothing all evening. He just watched me, occasionally looking like he wanted to speak, but didn't, as if he had too many questions and didn't know where to begin. And I sat there, amid the clinking of glasses, laughter, and the steady beat of waves behind me, like the heartbeat of a stranger. I sat there and realized something. Success can take you far, but what truly creates distance is the moment you return. And no one wants to understand who you are anymore. The dinner reached its peak as the lighting shifted from honey gold to a soft amber, the exact hue I once requested for sunset ceremonies at Solstice's Bali branch. Only this time, I was sitting among people who had no idea how many years I had spent outside that glow, building the very experiences they were now enjoying. The main course arrived, grilled cod with wasabi sauce, served with fresh greens and chilled sake. One of the suggestions I'd made to the culinary team 3 months ago while planning this celebration. And yet, I was just another guest at the table, listening to tired tales of financial triumphs, investment fund expansions, and casual remarks about people deemed outside the norms. Brian Wright, my future brother-in-law, Rebecca's boyfriend, was the one to start the conversation I had suspected would come. He raised a glass of Grand Cru red wine, swirling it gently as if the wrist motion wasn't for tasting, but to show off his pearl dial Rolex Daytona, a limited edition for Monaco Grand Prix guests. He leaned toward me, wearing that half smile of someone offering kindness on a leash, and asked, "So, you still do those travel gigs with kids and stuff? Honestly, how do you even make it work on that kind of salary these days?" I turned to him, eyes neither cold enough to offend nor warm enough to invite. I was about to say something neutral, polite but firm, when Rebecca cut in, her voice still soft as silk but sharp as a brand-new razor. She crossed her legs, her hand resting on an albino crocodile, Hermes Kelly, a limited piece made only for the East Asian market, paired with a hand-embroidered Dior couture gown. She tilted her head at me like examining an artifact from another century. Actually, come to think of it, she's kind of persistent. No insurance, no pension, no one to plan for her future. Yet she's still hanging on after 8 years. Admirable, in that romanticized way of hers. My mother laughed, not loud, not flashy. Just a soft chuckle from the corner of her mouth, passing through a sip of Dom Perignon rosé. The sound touched the bottom of her crystal flute, glinting off the violet diamond ring. A gift from my father on their 40th anniversary, if I remember correctly. She didn't look at me right away. She sipped. Set the glass down as if even that had to carry the weight of ceremony. Then finally turned toward me. Her face pampered by products not found in ordinary stores, flawless as porcelain, gently curved by warm light into something exquisitely cold. "I just worry about you, dear. At your age, with no stability, no one to look after you. Don't you feel a little sad?" I said nothing, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I realized there are some people who will never listen, even if you carry an entire world inside your answer. Mason looked at me then. This time his eyes weren't hesitant, they were almost sorrowful, and that hurt more than anything said that evening, because it came from the one person who knew me before everything broke. I sat upright, slowly cutting into my fish, slowly chewing. The taste was unremarkable, even though I knew exactly where this cod had been sourced. Hokkaido, where I'd signed the supply contract myself, on a winter night cold enough to numb my fingers. I knew the greens, the salts, the glassware they were using. I knew the lighting layouts, the staff rotation schedule, and the playlist set to shift with each stage of the evening. And I knew, they knew none of it. I stayed silent, because I wanted them to be fully themselves, entirely immersed in the version of me they'd carried for 8 years. The wandering girl with a handful of passports, living a life they always believed was inferior. I wanted to wait until they tripped over the truth themselves, until they faced it, until they realized Not everyone who stays silent is weak. I sat there, under the flickering candlelight mirrored by the water, surrounded by the faces that once made up my entire childhood, and I realized the greatest distance between two people isn't silence. It's when one has changed and the other still clings to an old image. I could have spoken. I could have told them about the early days of solstice, starting from a tiny office in Chiang Mai, where the air conditioner kept breaking down and the lights flickered non-stop. Yet we sat there, discussing travel philosophy like we were rewriting the way people saw the world. I could have told them about my first presentation in Geneva, how I spoke in 3 languages, shaking so hard I nearly fell stepping off the stage, but still walked away with our first contract from a Swiss resort chain. I could have told them I was the one who created the deep culture journey model, where travelers don't just stay in resorts, but spend days with local families, learn to cook traditional dishes, craft by hand, and contribute directly to the local economy. I could have shown data, evidence, articles, awards. I could have stunned them, silenced them, but I didn't. Not because I feared they wouldn't believe me, but because I knew if I had to be dazzlingly successful just to be heard, then that kind of listening was already meaningless. There was a time I typed out a message to my mother after being invited to speak at the Global Travel Forum in Kyoto. "I'll be on the main panel. You'd probably love this concept. We're designing the opening ceremony with Japanese lantern traditions and live music." Then I deleted it, because I could already picture her reading just the first line, then replying, "Your sister just bought a condo in South Beach. Your father's so proud." I once drafted an email to Rebecca, subject line, "Solstice Morocco Journey featured in Wander and Lux." Then I erased it, because I could see her face, swirling wine while talking about the housing market, lightly chuckling when she mentioned tour guide jobs, and I knew she wouldn't read past the second paragraph. I used to think I stayed silent, waiting for the right moment, but over time, I realized I stayed silent because I didn't want to win a race I never chose to run. I wanted them to see me as a person, no accolades, no money, no title. I wanted to know, if I were just a girl with a job they disapproved of, would I still deserve a seat at this table? And now, sitting there, amid golden lights, clinking crystal, and the soft pulse of waves in the distance, I knew the answer, clearer than ever. Part 9. Tension peaks. The $5,000 bill is brought out, future brother-in-law. Panics. Silence spreads across the table. The ocean breeze began to pick up as dessert was being served. Though candles still burned on the table, I could see the staff quietly placing transparent windshields at the far edge, as if nature itself sensed something was about to shift. Something invisible, not weather-related, but deeply human. The table had grown quieter. Perhaps the wine had set in, or maybe everyone was growing weary of the self-congratulating stories looping around old achievements. I glanced around, my father chatting with a nearby investor, Rebecca glued to her phone as if an email from the New York office was the most pressing matter, my mother talking to her high school friend about a new resort opening in the Maldives. No one noticed the event manager appear at the end of the table, dressed in a tailored black suit, holding a slim leather folder that anyone familiar with places like this would recognize: the bill. I knew exactly how much it contained, and I knew exactly whose face would shift first. The manager gave a slight bow, handed the folder to the person seated closest, Rebecca's boyfriend, then stepped back, disappearing like a passing breeze. He took it, opened it, and in that instant, I saw the change. From composed to surprised, then panic poorly masked by a forced frown. He immediately glanced down at his Rolex, pretending to check the time, but really just trying to avoid eye contact, then let out a dry laugh, trying to keep his tone even. I think there's a mistake here. This number can't be right. We didn't order this much, did we?" Rebecca leaned in, frowning as she read, $9,800. She looked straight at the manager. Get the director out here. The manager bowed and walked away. My mother furrowed her brows, her instinctive response whenever she suspected staff had made a mistake. My father still hadn't noticed, still deep in conversation with the guest beside him. And me? I stayed seated, unrushed, unreactive. I quietly set my silver spoon down on the gold-rimmed porcelain plate, the kind I had personally chosen from a limited collection for high-end Asian events, and waited. The manager returned, this time with another man, the lead for tonight's event. He walked up, calmly, voice unwavering. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no error in the bill. The total is correct and has already been paid in full by a representative of Solstice Travel Group. Isn't that the company that designs luxury travel experiences? The one with the 6-month wait list? Someone asked. Yes, the lead replied. The manager bowed deeper this time, his eyes turning toward me, not calling my name, not elaborating further, but the look alone was enough. Enough for everyone at the table to realize what I had kept hidden for 8 years. The truth, like the tide, had finally arrived. Not loud, not violent, but irreversible. My mother was the first to turn toward me. Rebecca gripped the handle of her Hermes bag, as if clinging to something familiar amid the sudden loss of control. My father finally turned, his eyes blank, caught in that split second between not understanding what had happened, or understanding too well, and trying not to believe it. I sat there, silent, neither denying nor confirming. Just breathing slowly, gazing into the space between the lights and the sea, where no words were needed anymore. Part 10. The truth revealed, quietly but unyielding. After the server left, the silence that settled over the dinner table was unlike any social pause I'd ever known. It wasn't the kind of silence between small talk topics, nor the kind one takes to hear the waves or the background music. It was the kind that came when everyone is suddenly forced to confront something no one had prepared for. That the person they once saw as a failure was now the one paying for the lavish party they were attending, through the name and reputation of a company they hadn't even realized they'd walked into. I didn't stand up. I didn't move to the center of the table. Didn't raise my head like a heroine in a scene written for redemption. I just looked at my mother, for a long time, as if I could use my gaze to knock gently on a door that had been shut for 8 years. Then I spoke. Not loudly, not sharply, just a low cadence, as if each word came from deep within my chest, a place that had held far too many things left unsaid. Solstice Travel Group is my company. I'm the one who designed every part of this experience, from the codfish, the table linen material, to the playlist that's playing right now during this dinner. No one responded immediately. They needed a few seconds to grasp it, and probably more minutes to accept it. I went on. But it wasn't an easy road. I left home with 1 backpack, worked unpaid in Peru, lived in a 9-square-meter dorm, walked 5 kilometers every morning to lead tours, got sick in the jungle without insurance, slept on floors in East Africa, shared a single laptop among 3 people because we couldn't afford another. Then I met people who believed in me. And together we built this company. First 3 people, then 10, then 50. Now, Solstice has branches in 17 countries, serves over 10,000 high-end clients a year, and has been voted Europe's leading brand in experiential luxury travel. I paused, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I wanted the people in front of me, my father, mother, sister, future brother-in-law, to truly be present in this moment, with nowhere to hide. I didn't say anything before, because I wanted to know, if I hadn't succeeded, if I were just a tour guide with no pension, no one to secure my future, would I still be seen as part of this family? Rebecca lowered her head and looked away. My mother pressed her lips together, as if trying to hold back something that had just cracked beneath layers of lipstick and self-discipline. Mason looked at me. This time, no longer hesitant or pitiful, but with a quiet form of acknowledgement, unspoken, but real. I placed my hand on the table, not to assert anything, just to steady my palm from shaking, to keep it from betraying the calm I had spent years preparing, just to say these words. I don't need an apology, and I don't need admiration, but if we're going to keep calling each other family, then I need just one thing: to be seen as myself, not as some mold someone forced me into and called love. After I finished speaking, no one argued, no snide comments, no one laughed, just the sound of waves in the distance, like the faint beat of a heart that had long been used to silence. My mother was the first to speak, not with humility, nor with full sincerity. She adjusted her posture, lifted her glass like she needed a layer of crystal between her hand and the air, then spoke, her voice slightly trembling, but still maintaining the bearing of someone long accustomed to controlling a room. If I ever said the wrong thing, it was only because I worry. Parents just want their children to have a stable future. We just never imagined you'd choose such a difficult path. That wasn't exactly an apology. It was a graceful save, an attempt to step back without surrendering the position of someone who'd been right all along. I nodded slowly, didn't smile but wasn't cold either, because I knew this was my mother's way of expressing helplessness, a feeling she didn't know how to name. Rebecca was different. She looked at me for a moment, her gaze stripped of its usual judgment, replaced by something I'd never seen from her before. Maybe gratitude, maybe surprise, maybe admiration too long restrained. "Hey," she said softly. "I didn't know everything that happened. If I ever made you feel small or not enough, then I'm sorry. I mean that." I didn't respond right away, because I needed to be sure it was a real apology. Not a quick line to smooth over discomfort, but something she said knowing she could no longer go back to her old role in the family dynamic. My future brother-in-law, still holding his wine glass, but no longer twirling his wrist, turned to me with a softened face, speaking in the tone of someone shifting from marketing to negotiation. "I know this may not be the time, but if you ever want to collaborate, expand into South America, or design a journey tied to luxury real estate, I think we should sit down. There's a lot we could do together." I looked at him. Longer than necessary, not because I was weighing his offer, but because I wanted him to feel that even when everything has changed, some people still haven't learned to change the part of themselves that needs it most. "Thank you," I said. "But what matters more to me right now isn't collaboration. It's boundaries." I turned to the rest of them, my eyes sweeping across the once familiar faces, now sitting like they were waiting for judgment from someone they never thought would sit among them as an equal. "From now on, if you want to keep in touch, I ask for one thing only: respect. Not because I've succeeded, but even if I hadn't." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't change my tone. But I knew. Those words were heard. Clearly. No one responded, not because they didn't want to, but because they knew. Everything they once used to bargain with me no longer held any weight. We sat there for a few more minutes. The party went on, following the planned script. Cake was brought out, candles lit, "Happy Birthday" sung amid awkward smiles. But the truth is, that birthday wasn't a celebration of my mother turning 60. It was the first time I came back, not to be accepted, but to say I never needed permission to exist in my own life. I left the table right after the birthday song ended, at the exact moment when everyone was busy with their last pour of champagne and repeating well-worn wishes that held little sincerity. No one stopped me. No, "Stay a little longer." No one stood up with me or said, "Let me walk you to the gate," as if everyone silently acknowledged that tonight I was no longer within the circle they needed to keep, and to my surprise, that didn't hurt. I walked slowly down the stone path back to the private villa, my heels tapping against the wooden walkway in a steady rhythm, like a clock that had stopped ticking because time no longer needed to be counted. The Hawaiian night air carried salt and herbs, interwoven like two layers of emotion I once thought could never blend. Acceptance and peace. 8 years ago, I had also walked away like this, also turned my back on a place I once called home. But back then, I carried a small fracture in my chest. The sting of rejection, of being cast out from the most sacred bond one can hold, family. But tonight, I carried only silence. No more bitterness, no more need to explain, no desire for promises made just to comfort me. I opened the villa door, removed my shoes, and sat down at the wooden desk facing the sea. The room's soft light flickered across the glass walls, reflecting like the thoughts inside me. Not rushing, not tangled, just a slow, patient rhythm. I thought about my mother, how she chose pride over taking one step toward pulling me into her arms, how she called her fears love, and called her denial of my path just wanting you to be stable. I thought about my father, the one who took me to his first building site when I was 8, who once said, "Mitchells never give up." And yet he was the one who gave up on a daughter just because she wouldn't live by the blueprint he had drawn. But then, I thought of myself, of the girl who once trembled picking up the phone for her first tour booking, of the woman who dared to stand in a global hospitality conference, speaking Spanish, English, and Vietnamese in a single morning, of me, the one who had just walked away from that table without bowing her head, without explaining, and no longer hoping to be understood. I slowly poured myself a glass of water. No wine, no color, no scent. Because in that moment, I didn't need to be intoxicated. I just needed to feel every beat of a heart no longer heavy with what had never been given. I picked up my phone, opened the Notes app, and typed a single, quiet line. No embellishment, no agenda. Tomorrow, start writing. I didn't know what I would write. Maybe a travelogue. Maybe a journey of forgiveness. Maybe a map of all the things I had to let go of to become who I truly am. I don't remember exactly when I first began to feel different. Maybe it was at 6 when I asked my father to buy me a book about countries around the world instead of the mini real estate toy set he had prepared. Or maybe it was at the first grade parent meeting, when my mother smiled and told the other moms that Rebecca had scored a perfect 100 in math, while I could say hello in 4 different languages, then followed it with a soft joke. Maybe she'll grow up to be a flight attendant. The whole table laughed, but I didn't, because I understood, in the way even a 6-year-old can, that adults can say they love you, but that doesn't mean they'll be proud of you. When Rebecca won the statewide academic award, we threw a party. Dad hired a private chef. Mom ordered a cake with her name printed on it. The whole house was decorated with flowers and photos. But when I made the National Geography Olympiad team, Dad just said, "Impressive, but what's that even for?" Then kept eating, eyes never lifting from his iPad. I learned not to mention my achievements. I learned to hide the small newspaper clippings with my name in the student spotlight column behind my workbook. I learned to pretend that the things which made me happy weren't important, simply because they didn't make anyone else feel proud. Every holiday, when Mason talked about finance seminars and Rebecca rambled about Manhattan condo markets, I just smiled, poured the tea, and tried not to feel like a guest in my own family. I began retreating into my own world, the one filled with maps covering my bedroom walls, travel magazines bought for $1 at secondhand bookstores, and email drafts to international exchange programs I never dared to mention. I didn't rebel, I didn't argue, I didn't run away. I just quietly pulled back, gently, slowly, silently, like a puzzle piece that had come to understand No matter how many angles it turned, it would never quite fit into the picture someone else had already drawn. Once, my grandmother told me when I was 12, "You're the wind, Megan." And wind doesn't live in glass cages. I didn't fully understand it then. But I've held on to those words ever since, as a quiet confirmation that I wasn't wrong for wanting to be different. I was only wrong for trying too long to be just like them. I woke up at 5:30 the next morning. Not because of an alarm, nor because any schedule awaited. It was simply that my body had grown used to a rhythm where no one had to nudge me, but I always knew I needed to show up, early, and with full resolve. I made coffee with the small machine in the warm kitchen, where the balcony overlooked the shoreline, breathing a fine mist, like a dream not yet fully awake. I opened my laptop, scrolling past an inbox full of collaboration offers from international brands and inquiries from media outlets wanting to feature the inspiring CEO story of Solstice. But I didn't read them closely. I only looked at those names as if they were labels. Nice to look at, but not the point. Because my mind was elsewhere, on a circle, one that began in childhood, which I once thought I had broken free from. A familiar pattern where I kept returning to the same role, even if the status, the money, the reputation had changed. The role of someone who had to prove, had to persuade, had to be good enough to be accepted. And I asked myself, when will I finally stop needing to prove anything? When will my belief in my own worth be strong enough to stay steady, even under the gaze of doubt from those I love? I remembered my mother's eyes last night, still carrying a trace of suspicion, as if my success were a beautiful coincidence, not the outcome of resilience. I thought of Rebecca's words, romantically good at life, and realized that in her mind, I had always been a soft variable in a family formula too rigid. An intriguing option, but never one that could be labeled standard. I thought of myself, the girl who once shrank away when joy wasn't shared, who kept silent when sadness was dismissed as weakness, and who overextended herself just to be called one of us. Then I let go of the coffee cup, placed it on the table, and took a deep breath. Because I understood that real freedom is not when others recognize you. It's when you no longer need them to, in order to feel whole. I sat still for a long time. No planning, no reacting, no fixing, just simply being present in that moment. As someone who had finally come to see their own reflection clearly, not from the outside, but from the cracks they once tried to hide. I hadn't planned to return to the main villa that morning. To be honest, I only passed by because I'd forgotten a leather notebook at the front desk, where I'd waited for the car to take me back to my private villa the night before, in a mood unfinished, filled with unnamed things. The lobby still carried the scent of cedarwood and gentle licorice, a fragrance I had chosen carefully from the collection of an artisan in Kyoto, a man who had devoted his life to studying the scents of ancient temples. A scent warm with memory, yet light enough not to overpower the character of the land where guests had come to stay. As I stepped in, I saw an elderly woman, slightly hunched, silver hair elegantly tied in a bun, chatting with the receptionist. She held a cup of hot tea in her hand. Not the standard teabag kind, but fresh leaf tea served in an ash-glazed ceramic cup. A detail only truly discerning guests would recognize as a regional specialty, not something found in commercial resorts. I didn't know who she was. I gave a slight nod in passing, meaning to walk by like anyone else. But then I heard her speak, a soft voice, slightly husky yet startlingly clear in the stillness of the space. I once booked a trip for my granddaughter, a tour exploring traditional villages in northern Vietnam. A company called, what was it? Solstice? That's right, Solstice Travel Group. It was beyond expectations. I froze, not out of pride, but from something else. A kind of emotion I hadn't felt in so long I forgot I had missed it. She didn't know me. She wasn't saying that to impress anyone. She had no idea the person who had designed that journey, who'd chosen everything from the breakfast dishes at local markets to the music played during dinner by the stream, was standing just a few steps away. I turned back, hesitated, then stepped closer with a small smile. "I'm the founder of Solstice." She looked at me, eyes widening just a little, like a small light being lit in the mist. No dramatic surprise, just a quiet recognition, enough to soothe the years I once thought all I had created would forever be buried under skeptical frowns. Really, that girl must have had so much heart. Every detail was thoughtful. And my granddaughter, for the first time in her life, put down her phone to take handwritten notes about what she learned from the locals. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, letting those words sink in like early morning light seeping through sheer curtains. Gentle, warm, and just strong enough to push back the long night that had clung to me for years. No press, no awards, no need to be known as a Mitchell. Just one real person who said thoughtful, and that was enough. She turned and walked away, slowly, peacefully. And I stood there a little longer, holding the leather notebook in my hands, which had now become a quiet testament to my presence in this world. No need to shout, no need to fight for space. I returned to my room, and for the first time, I opened my laptop and typed the first lines of an email that wasn't about work. "Mom, if you truly want to understand me, I'm ready to tell you the story I've lived for the past 8 years." The reply didn't come right away, but I knew this was the first time I had chosen to begin a conversation, not just draw a silent boundary, because it was time to set that boundary for myself. I used to think that if anyone in the family were to see me first, beyond the layer of prejudice and opinions, it would be Mason. Not because we were ever especially close, but because Mason was the quietest one in the house, the one who stayed silent during loud dinners, who looked at everything as if trying to piece it together with his own, uniquely private logic. After that dinner, I didn't return with them. I went back to the small room on the southern edge of the resort, where white orchids cast soft shadows through thin curtains, and the waves didn't rush like they did near the main villas. I dozed off for a while, until there was a knock on the door. Gentle, steady, unmistakable. It was Mason. No phone in hand, no explanations. Just a nod in greeting, and a paper bag holding 2 iced coffees from the little seaside shop. The same place where, as kids, I used to sneak off with him for banana bread during summer breaks. We sat on the porch. Didn't say much, didn't need to. Just 2 adults trying to recover something long buried. A connection without judgment, without labels. Mason was the first to break the silence. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Maybe I just didn't know where to begin." I simply shook my head. No apology needed. Just presence. He took out his phone and showed me a photo. His daughter, little Sophie, in her preschool uniform, proudly holding up a cardboard airplane model. Mason looked at me, his voice slow but steady. "I want her to understand that success doesn't have just one formula, and that there are women strong enough to create their own." I didn't respond right away. My throat tightened. Not from overwhelming emotion, but from something gentler, like someone had just untied a knot that had been resting, unnoticed, for too long. We sat there until late afternoon. The sea breeze began to shift, carrying a soft saltiness and a rustling sound like quiet agreement. Mason didn't promise to change the family. He didn't say everything would be okay. But just the fact that he came, listened, and laid the first brick toward rebuilding a bridge was enough for me to believe that not everything had gone too far. Before leaving, he asked, "If I brought Sophie to Solstice one day, would you show her the real-world map?" I smiled. "I'll let her pick any point she wants. Then we'll sketch out a journey starting from there." And when Mason disappeared down the stone steps, I watched his back for a long time. as if trying to imprint this version of him into memory. The one without the polished briefcase, without the glow of family legacy, just a brother, learning how to see his sister through new eyes. And the next morning, I received a message from Mom. An invitation, not quite an apology, not exactly reconciliation, but a door gently opening to Alma'S, the eatery she once looked down on. We went to Alma'S on a Wednesday morning, unannounced, unplanned, as if all three of us understood that if we thought too long, if we waited for the right time, it would never happen. Alma'S was a small diner tucked behind a row of laundromats and secondhand shops, where the scent of roasted coffee had seeped into every floral curtain, every aged leather booth over the years. I chose the square wooden table by the window, where the slant of sunlight fell across my father's shoulder, casting a soft yellow glow across his forehead. The kind of light that only appears when someone finally sits still, with no need to keep up appearances. No one started with big words, no apologies, no, let's start over. No mention of Solstice, Hawaii, or the Hermes bags glinting under party lights that night. Just a paper menu, misaligned typewritten lines, and a young server waiting to take our order with a simple, sincere smile. No explanation needed. I ordered my usual soft fried eggs, toasted barley bread, seared cherry tomatoes, and a black coffee, no sugar. My mother hesitated slightly, then nodded and ordered the same. My father raised an eyebrow. If this actually tastes good, then my daughter really has unusual taste in food. We laughed, not because it was especially funny, but because it was the first time my father used the words, my daughter, without attaching a condition. And it was also the first time in a very long while that I didn't feel weighed down by some invisible scale between pride and disappointment. The eggs arrived, unpretentious, just 2 eggs fried to perfection, edges golden and crisp, yolks still creamy like melted butter, sprinkled with sea salt and freshly ground black pepper. My father cut a piece, chewed slowly, then set his knife down. He didn't look at me. He looked at the plate, as if facing something he could no longer dodge with reason or outer confidence. I've never had eggs this good before. I didn't answer. My mother didn't either. We just continued our breakfast, unhurried, unforced. And perhaps it was that silence, the kind that didn't need to fill space, that became the first foundation of a kind of love that had always existed somewhere between disappointment and expectation. A chance to accept each other as we are, without needing to revise anything. As we left the diner, my father glanced back at the worn wooden sign, Alma'S, honest food, no show, and gave a small nod, as if mentally noting something important that he wasn't quite ready to say out loud. 3 days later, a message from Rebecca arrived on a lightly rainy afternoon. As the droplets tapped evenly on the office window, like someone gently knocking on memory, with echoes that were tender, unhurried. No apology, no justification, just one simple question that, though it appeared casual, opened up a whole drawer of memories I had tucked deep away in my mind. Would you like to plan my bachelorette party in Paris? I always knew you loved Paris. I read it again and again, not to check the content, but to feel the tone. No more orders sugar-coated. No more condescension or assumption that I should feel grateful for any attention she gave me. Just a sister, reaching across the past, hesitant, but honest. I typed a few words, then deleted them, then typed again, and deleted again, until there was only one line left, short, but this time with no defensiveness. If you mean it as a real sister would. I didn't know how much Rebecca would understand, but I knew this was the first time I was responding not from old wounds, but from the quiet peace that was slowly growing within me, day by day. Forgiveness, as it turns out, doesn't come in a burst. It's not someone's greatness. It's a series of small choices, every day, every moment, every breath, to no longer be bound by the wounds others have left. I still remember how Rebecca used to make me feel small inside my own home. But that day, as I looked at her message, all I saw was a woman also trying to mend something. Not for me, but for herself. And I understood. Sometimes forgiveness isn't giving someone the right to hurt you again, but freeing yourself from having to carry that hurt as an identity. A few days later, I received a handwritten letter. Not from Rebecca, not from a business partner, but from someone I never expected. That afternoon, at the Solstice office in Bali, where silk ribbons danced above with the ocean wind and the distant waves played like an endless soundtrack of freedom, I received a letter. A real letter, written on coarse paper, the ink slightly smudged, sent from an address I had erased from memory long ago. Mitchell Urban Properties, Miami, Florida. It was from my mother. Not an email, not a forwarded article about my success to show she had secretly believed in me. But a handwritten letter, each word as if penned from a part of her life that had passed without ever truly being lived with me. I was wrong to think that loving you meant shaping you into who I felt safest with. But today, when I saw your face on the cover of a magazine, when I read about your 8-year journey, how you started with just a backpack and a map, I knew I had missed the most beautiful thing. Not your achievements, but you, just as you are. I folded the letter, not because I didn't want to read more, but because I didn't need to. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I knew, for me now, recognition is no longer the destination. I had already passed that threshold, the place where you no longer need someone to understand, to apologize, to come back and say, "You were right." Outside, the sunset bathed the mossy rooftops of Ubud's coastal village, the day's last light washing the palm trees in red, and the breeze still carried salt like it did the first day I arrived in Bali, with an old suitcase and a dream no one believed in yet. I opened my laptop, placed my hands on the keyboard. The first lines of my travel memoir appeared, not ornate, not boastful, just a beginning as gentle as the way I had started life again. I used to be called unstable, a failure, a traitor to tradition. But I lived, truly lived, in places people only dream of when they shut their laptops and book business-class flights. I've walked across 32 mountains, slept under 14 unfamiliar roofs, and cried in at least 6 different airports. But I've never felt lost, because I always walked with my own 2 feet. I looked up through the window. Light streamed quietly into the warm wooden room, landing on the large world map hanging on the wall, where I marked every place I'd been, not with red pins, but small hand-drawn circles in brown ink. A reminder to myself that every destination, grand or humble, once held a piece of my heart. And I knew. I didn't need another letter to prove I was worthy. Because this final part of the journey is no longer about them. It's about me, just me, and myself, moving forward. Early morning, I returned to Lisbon, the first city where I had once lived in a 12-square-meter rented room, with a creaky wooden bed and a tiny window facing a cobbled street. I brought my half-finished manuscript, a few notebooks, an empty journal, and no expectations. I sat in the familiar cafe on the corner of Alfama, ordered the same espresso that once tasted so bitter it sobered my fears. In front of me were strangers, but each bore the expression of freedom. Not because they were wealthy, but because they were living their own lives. No explanations, no show, no proof owed to anyone. I took out my journal and wrote, without an outline, without thinking of publishers, without caring whether the book would sell. I wrote because I had been silent for too long, and now each word felt like a breath, unhurried, unforced, in sync only with the rhythm of my heart. That afternoon, I walked by the harbor, where little wooden boats still bobbed with the Atlantic breeze. No one recognized me. No one called my name. No one mentioned Solstice, the articles, or the television features. And precisely because of that, I felt whole. No one left to persuade. No gaze left to answer. No seat I had to fight for at anyone's table. I didn't need to sit at theirs. I could build my own, anywhere I chose. I paused at the dock, watching birds glide through the sky darkening into amber. The wind touched my cheek. Not harsh, but just enough to remind me I was still here, fully present, and had never once disappeared from my own life. And I thought, sometimes the world isn't meant for you to go far, but to realize you were never small. Have you ever had to choose between meeting others' expectations and following the call of your own heart? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about women who were unfairly dismissed by their own families but didn't give up. They chose success to prove one thing: that parents aren't always right.